We had about a week in New York around that gig at the Garden, and once again I was confronted with the fact that I didn't have any real life outside the band. Most musicians I knew wanted to talk about equipment, stuff I could give a rat's ass about. I thought there was so much more to the world, even if I was still learning what that could be. I like to talk about music, but on a historical level, an emotional level, not a technical level. I spent a lot of time dissatisfied because I didn't have friends to talk to about things that might be stimulating, educational, or enlightening. As far as the women I hooked up with, I knew it wasn't about deep conversation. I chose them because of what I thought other people would think and because of what I hoped I could convince myself. I must be somebody worthwhile because this beautiful woman wants to be with me. It was all about bolstering my sense of self. Being with someone to make myself feel better always meant being with a woman others wanted, a woman others envied me for having. Thankfully, I managed to meet some women who, besides being beautiful, were also smart, funny, and well-read. But even with those women, I had little to offer in terms of a relationship. I wasn't open, and I wasn't going to give anything of myself. So it was more or less two people trading services. Though it was hard for me to articulate, all of this made me feel even more isolated than I already felt. I remember one woman coming to my apartment and starting to get itchy for cocaine after a while. She apparently had a major habit. She began to get dressed to go out and score some blow. "I'll come right back," she said. "If you leave," I told her, "you don't come back." You can be with somebody and still feel alone. For me, actually being alone was worse. One evening, I drove my burgundy Mercedes down to a hip restaurant and bar, one of those places that was known as a hangout. I pulled up to the curb near the entrance on 5th Avenue and 11th Street and then sat in my car. I wanted to go in, maybe talk to some people, hang out, but I froze. You can't go in there on your own. I didn't know anyone. I couldn't risk being in a situation like that. I couldn't make friends. I couldn't hang out. The Star Child? Yes, of course he could, and even the version of the Star Child I could muster at parties put on by promoters or radio stations or our own management. Those were controlled situations. People in that context expected the Star Child. I depended on being the Star Child to interact with them. I depended on presenting a likable persona and hid my real self, the one-eared kid from Queens who still didn't believe anyone could really like him and wouldn't know what to do if someone did. Who am I? Where do I belong? I was supposed to be a big rock star, and there I was paralyzed in my car outside a restaurant, afraid to go inside. The contrast between how I was perceived and the reality of my situation could not have been more stark. Who would believe this? With a last look at the entrance, I pulled away from the curb, drove around the block, and steered the car back uptown to my apartment. I didn't have the basic skills to function in a setting like that. Most people were petrified by the idea of going on stage, not me. Whatever emptiness or insecurities I had waited at the side of the stage. I lived for those moments. I wanted the crowd to love me because I still hadn't learned to love myself enough to get over the most basic social phobias I harbored off stage.